this entire pandemic, we've all had to kind of slow down and appreciate the little things in life and the walks that we get to do outside and, just those little moments. So I think the same will apply to the backcountry, that like things will take longer. You may not be able to go to the zones that you once went to, but like any chance that we get, even if it's just like tromping around your backyard hill or whatever it may be, we should just be grateful for it and try to do it responsibly.
This episode of the Backcountry podcast is brought to you by the Vermont Department of Tourism. Winter is here, and there are few places better for adventure than Vermont. Iconic ski areas, lift access side country, and of course backcountry opportunities up and down the spine of the Green Mountains. And after a long day outside, cozy inns, craft beer, and farm-to-table dinners await. But things are not normal, and planning is key. There are steps you must take before you can travel to the state. While Vermont is open for business, visitors must quarantine for 14 days or 7 days with a negative COVID test. Planning is part of most ski vacations or weekends away, but this year planning is imperative to keep yourself and Vermonters safe. At resorts, lifts and lodges have limited capacity and some are requiring reservations for parking. Many hotels, inns, and restaurants are operating with limitations in place as well, so knowing the rules before you go is key. Again, Vermont is open for business and ready to offer you world-class winter experiences and adventures. It will just take a little extra planning this year to do it right and help us all stop the spread of COVID-19. Check out vermontvacation.com for the most up-to-date travel restrictions. Welcome to the Backcountry Podcast. I'm Adam Howard. We're calling this episode Uphill and Beyond. It was recorded in November as part of Vermont Ski and Snowboard Museum's virtual Red Bench series. In this episode, we reached out to friends from American skiing epicenters to get their take on how COVID will impact our backcountry and resort experience this year. What will backcountry travel look like this winter? How will the skiing economy deal with the uncertainty COVID presents? Will trailheads be packed? I think that's a certainty. So joining me today, we have Mike Hattrup. From the U.S. freestyle team to Greg Stump's eponymous film Blizzard of Oz, ski guide to product developer, Mike Hattrup is both everyman and everything but. He built the K2 Telemark and Backcountry brands and is now the U.S. Alpine Products Manager at Fisher Skis when he's not skiing Sun Valley with his family or guiding in Europe. He joins us from his home in Ketchum, Idaho. Also joining me is freelance journalist Megan Michelson out of Tahoe City, California. She's editor-at-large for Backcountry magazine and a correspondent for Outside. Megan covers skiing and the outdoors for publications like the San Francisco Chronicle, REI's Co-op Journal, and many, many more. Finally, we have Andrew McLean. Andrew's skied all 7 continents, including trips to Baffin Island, Antarctica, Svalbard, Morocco, Kashmir, Iran, and numerous Alaska expeditions. In 1995, he wrote The Shooting Gallery, a guide to steep skiing in the Wasatch Mountains. Andrew lives in Park City, Utah with his wife, 2 girls, and 2 poorly behaved dogs. Well, welcome everyone to the Backcountry Podcast.
What is it like for each of your states? Like, can I get on a plane and go to California right now, Megan, from Vermont and not quarantine? Or, I mean, I know Utah, I've talked to a friend that runs a lodge there and they're like, yeah, just come on out. Here's our policy, go.
Yeah, a lot of states have different requirements, but California currently, yes, you can come right in. I think it's important to remind people if you are traveling out of state to check those state travel requirements before you go. I know New Mexico, Maine, Vermont, forget some others have the mandatory quarantine or showing a negative COVID test before you cross state lines.
And it's certainly a concern here among resorts and folks that I've talked to that, like, with our restrictions, scientifically sound as they may be, it will likely reduce traffic. It will, folks will go to New Hampshire or stay in New York or what have you. But we can get back to resort skiing. And I know we wanted to talk a little bit about some uphill policies because, I think that trend will accelerate, as we've seen it grow already. But, the great concern that we have here, and I know that anywhere there's touring, we're worried about access. Certainly our considerations in Vermont are a little different where you may have to cross private property rather. It's certainly less the case in much of the West, but what are some of the considerations you're hearing in the Wasatch, for instance, Andrew, about access? And, you already have a real problem in the canyons with traffic. And what are some of your thoughts and what are you hearing out there from your friends at like the Wasatch Backcountry Alliance?
The access in Park City is really problematic. I mean, I live in Park City, but I don't do any touring out of Park City because it's all private property from the old silver mining days. Mm-hmm. So there's almost no way, except if you buy a pass, to go access the backcountry. So, most of the backcountry in the Wasatch is through the three main canyons, Little Cottonwood, Big Cottonwood, Mill Creek in the central Wasatch. And it's kind of getting to be a perfect storm here because we've already had a lot of issues with traffic. Everybody just rents a car and drives up. And so there was a lot of emphasis on carpooling and public transportation. But with COVID, that's, not so great anymore. Everybody wants to, separate and drive. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, whether it's they're trying to limit it. They're trying to encourage people to go with their close friends, but we're running out of places to park. It's getting to be more and more of an issue. And I think this year is going to be a huge issue because the backcountry has just been taking off exponentially over the last few years. I can't believe how many people are out there now.
Yeah, it's crazy. How about up where you are, Hat?
Well, the biggest problem with access is being able to find the equipment you want to get out there. I know at Fisher we're sold out of all of our touring gear. We have been for a month. And I saw this coming as early as last March. As soon as the resort shut down, everybody was calling up asking if we had any touring gear. And I know we saw that in all the resorts that were shut down. There was tons of people touring up the piste. Access is not really an issue in the Sawtooths and the ranges right around Sun Valley. There's not that many people around, and so that's not going to be a problem. Most of the yurts I guide a little bit for Sun Valley Guides, and there's a yurt system there in Sun Valley Trucking owns. And I don't think any of the guys, I don't think we're going to be doing any yurt trips this year. Clients can stay in the yurts, but we probably won't mix guides and clients. If we do yurt trips, it's going to be guides coming in daily to go tour with them. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a different winter, and it will be busy in the backcountry. I mean, I think the other concern is there's going to be a lot of people out there. So there's going to be people above you. There's going to be people with not a lot of experience. That I think is going to be a bigger concern.
For sure. Megan, what are you thinking in Tahoe as far as access, and then let's talk about safety too?
Yeah, definitely parking, like Andrew mentioned, is already an issue in the Tahoe area with popular backcountry areas, even pre-COVID, having, parking jams and things like that. So that will certainly be problematic. And then I think what Mike said is spot on, that we have this increase of people wanting to get away from the crowds and get outside. Same that we saw with like bike sales over the summer. A lot of people are going to be buying backcountry ski gear and getting into backcountry skiing for the first time, which is great in order, to get them out there experiencing that. But we also need to make sure that they have both the education and the resources and the gear and the partners that they need to do it safely. I interviewed the director of the American Avalanche Association recently, and his main concern is obviously, making sure these people are getting the avalanche education that they need. And obviously at this time, it's tough to sign up for a course, in a group setting and get your Avi 1 certification. But a lot of those organizations that offer avalanche courses are doing virtual classroom settings and then field day, for the snow safety part of the course. So there are still ways to get that avalanche education in a safe, small group kind of manner. So I think we just need to do a good job of getting that messaging out to people who are new to the backcountry, that you still need to take those courses and make sure you have all the safety information you need before you go.
And even before this pandemic, getting a spot in any of those courses, even when they were in the field, was increasingly difficult. Avi level 1 for sure. Perhaps one of the takeaways from this will be a more virtual experience that can reach more people with some of that curriculum. Because that's a big concern I have, is the education side, and we trade in that information, and it's hard to get that out there to people where they want to get it.
I was talking to Sarah Carpenter, who's one of the owners of American Avalanche Institute, and they are doing a lot of virtual classes, like Megan mentioned. A lot of the online stuff that where it's normally in a classroom setting will be virtual, and then which helps them in a lot of ways, because one of the problems before was they have so many days with the Park Service that they can use the backcountry. So by moving more of those sessions online, it gives them more days in the field. Yeah, it's going to be busy for sure for all the educators as well.
Andrew, let's get back to the Wasatch just a little bit. Obviously, you've seen that growth, and it's more and more difficult to get up the canyons to do what you do. And what have you been doing? I don't want you don't have to give away anything, but what have you been doing to get where you want to go? What's changed for you over the last several years, and how do you anticipate that'll affect what you do this winter?
Well, it's the days of the easy picking, low hanging fruit are pretty much gone. I mean, a lot of times there'll be the trailheads at some of the popular spots like the Y Couloir. They'll be full at 5, 6 in the morning. So it's good in a way, because it's really forced me to go out and find new areas, and also to be quiet about them. It's the Wasatch is really small, and there's just not that many places to go. So you got to know where to go and when to go. But the pressure is definitely on. You're used to be able to have your pick at Mount Superior, why not, Y Couloir, any of those, and now they get hit all the time. And a lot of times there will be a chain of people going up them, which is kind of an interesting new avalanche concern, because it's one thing if you're just 2 people going up, just you and your buddy, but suddenly if you're looking back and there's 10 other parties below you, if there is an avalanche, it's going to travel a couple thousand feet and catch a whole string of people instead of just 2 people. So it's changing the dynamic of the backcountry in the Wasatch. There's always the terrain and the snowpack, but now there's the crowding issue as well. So it's been fun. I mean, you got to be more creative about it, find places to go, and
Are you setting your skin tracks even steeper than ever before?
Yeah, just straight up.
Marshizing right from the car.
Yeah, crampons. Yeah, ice axes.
Megan, I know you have young children, and you're probably not touring as much as you might like to. And I don't want to assume anything, but what are you doing, and what are you seeing about getting your kicks in the top?
Yeah, I think, being a parent has made me appreciate whatever time I get out there. And obviously I enjoy going out and skiing with them too, but they're not quite into backcountry skiing just yet. But I think the resorts are kind of sending this message out too, but I think it applies to the backcountry as well, and this entire pandemic, we've all had to kind of slow down and appreciate the little things in life and the walks that we get to do outside, and just those little moments. So I think the same will apply to the backcountry, that things will take longer. You may not be able to go to the zones that you once went to, but any chance that we get, even if it's just tromping around your backyard hill or whatever it may be, we should just be grateful for it and try to do it responsibly. And I feel that way, just any little, even if it's just one little lap from my house, I'm super happy about being able to do that now.
Yeah. Amen to that. Let's talk about this growth in uphilling, skinning up within a resort boundary. Obviously this has been going on for a long time, certainly in Europe. And there's even peace touring, right? They call it Hattrup, where you'll connect all these.
Yeah, but I don't think it's been going on really any longer there than it has here. Oh, yeah. I never used to hear about it over there. It's certainly popular now, like it is here. Most people are doing it after work there, as opposed to a lot of people here do it in the morning. But and the cool thing about Europe is there's these mountain huts everywhere, so you can skin up, have a goulash soupe and a beer, and then ski down. It's been an issue in that parking lots are filling up, and they weren't ready for this either.
Right. And for those of you who don't know, Mike Hattrup, who worked for many years with K2, now works for Fisher. What are you seeing on the equipment side of that equation? How many people are buying equipment simply for that and don't have any expectation that they're going to ski tour beyond that?
Well, it's hard to know exactly, but there's definitely a group that don't have any aspirations for for true backcountry, but they want something different than sitting on a Stairmaster or a treadmill, and skinning up outside and watching the sun come up is certainly, in my world, way more preferable to a gym, especially right now. But some of the cool things I think about being able to skin up at the resort are, you don't need to have any special equipment other than touring skis, boots, bindings. You don't need a beacon, shovel, probe. You don't need to know how to use any of that. You don't need to be a very good skier, because instead of maybe deep powder, wind affected, or breakable crud, you've got a perfectly groomed pitch. And you don't need to be paying attention to what's going on you need to be paying attention to any mountain traffic, snowmobiles or cats and that stuff, but you don't need to be worrying about whoops and what's going on with nature. You can put in a podcast or music and lose yourself in that. And I think it's a great way to get out. And some of those people will never go into the backcountry, but some of them will go after they've done it for a while and go, you know what, this is pretty cool. I want to go try skiing that powder slope over there.
Megan, what are some of your conversations been like, and some of your research around talking to resorts about this dynamic? Because it's certainly, talk about the way different states and different areas are dealing with COVID. It's certainly that way with resorts dealing with uphill traffic, because it's the Wild West everywhere. It's different everywhere.
It is. Well, I think it depends on the resort. You have places like Aspen Snowmass, which has always been very welcoming to uphill traffic, and even continued in March through the spring, allowing uphill users. And then other resorts that previously did allow it, shut it down in March because they just didn't want to encourage people to travel or to congregate. I've spoken to a couple of resorts in Tahoe who that do allow back or uphill access. One of them doesn't want to market it at all, barely has it on their website, because they don't want crowds coming specifically for that. The marketing director there told me that it's like encouraging people to walk through a construction zone, because they're early in the morning, there's snowcats, like they just don't want a lot of people who don't know what they're doing trying to do that. And then Sugar Bowl ski area, which is normally like one of our Tahoes more welcoming to uphill, is only allowing uphill access this year if you have a season pass, and they limited season pass sales. So it's a pretty, you can't just show up and skin up the mountain there anymore. So I think you, again, have to check your local resort before you go, mind their policies. A lot of them have specific routes or specific hours, or you have to buy a ticket. So I agree with Mike that it's like a great way to get people outside and sort of using that touring gear, but you do have to check to make sure your resort is allowing it this year.
And Andrew, you're a big time uphill skier within a resort confined area, right? You've been all over this for a long time, right?
I would be if it was allowed. I think it's pretty much forbidden in all of the Utah places. Like Park City allows it, but it's you can only go halfway up one run, and you have to do it early in the morning. So you can't really use it for anything aside from just a little bit of a workout. Brighton allows uphill traffic to access the backcountry, but none of the other resorts allow it. Like Snowbird, I think you have to hire a guide and do it before opening hours, so that they technically allow it. I don't think anybody's ever done it. But,
hire a guide to check avalanche conditions, or make sure you don't go off the blue squares. Or...
I don't know. It's it is a little tricky because the Park City area, I can see it's all private property. If they want to allow it or not allow it, that's their choice. But the other areas, Brighton, Solitude, Alta, Snowbird, are on public land. So I think that ideally they would have an uphill track that you could do, anytime, 24 hours, where you could use that and get to the backside, because without that, you're shutting down the access. And I understand their problem. They've got, they're shooting avalanche guns, they've got powder, they're doing winch catting, they really don't need uphill traffic. But at the same point, I think it would be ideal if they did have an uphill lane that was just open, all the time, that skiers could use.
And Hattrup, you probably have the most experience in Europe, being over there for many years and guiding and et cetera. And we always hear like, well, you can go uphill anytime you want over there. Is that really true, or is it different country by country? And
I'm not sure. I don't think it's countrywide. I think it's like here, it's resort by resort, but they're more open to it. And a lot of these, kind of like what Andrew was talking about, they have these routes that don't interfere with the resort, that go up to a mountain hut, and it's essentially a road. So you can skin up that, and those you can do 24 hours. And I know some of the resorts there, because parking lots were filling up with people that weren't buying tickets, they've changed some of the policies. It's not as open as maybe it was, but it's not as restrictive as it is here, like most skiing in Europe.
And it seems like here, wherever you are, it's a business proposition, right? There are not enough dollars that resort operators see in the uphill community to justify spending a lot of time figuring out the policies to make it, worth it. Is that a fair assessment? Or
I think that's a fair assessment, but I think maybe they're missing the part that, you've got a family that's trying to figure out where to go on a ski vacation, and maybe they don't want to ski every day and they want to do something else. And maybe part of that activity is uphill skinning. In the overall scheme of things, there's a tiny fraction of people that are going uphill at resorts. So from a business standpoint, it's maybe not that important to them, but I don't know. It's another thing you can do at the resort, and people I think want to know what else there is. Can we go ice skate? Can we go sledding? There's a lot of things that maybe us diehard skiers aren't thinking about, that a family is thinking about, when you got you've got people that maybe aren't as serious in skiing, or they've got younger kids that are just as interested in sledding down a hill as they are skiing. So the more things that you can offer the customer, I think the better the attraction of the resort is.
What I've seen is, a lot of the European resorts were community owned. They were a village or a community before they were a resort. So it's not owned by a single corporation or an entity. It's, much more open to the community, and they've got cheese sheds and old houses and all sorts of, traffic, or people need to move around in the mountains a lot more. Whereas the U.S. areas are more developed. They're a little smaller, they're a little tighter, and they were built as a ski area, not really as a town that turned into a ski area.
I want to shift gears just a little bit here and talk about the horizon, because I think, we're all really looking forward to skiing this year, and we hope that the end of times don't come and that we can do that. But, like Andrew, you'd be in Antarctica right now, right?
On a cruise ship, no less. Double negative there. Yeah. So like getting into Argentina was a problem, and then on top of that, there was getting on a cruise ship. So there were countries. There were issues with getting into a country, but then there was just the issue of going on a cruise ship, which a lot of people that's tricky to begin with. But with COVID spreading on cruise ships, people weren't thrilled to spend the next 6 months floating in quarantine in the Drake Passage. Well, nobody would accept them.
That's through ISAC's expeditions, right?
You're right, out of Tahoe.
At what point it's Doug Stoop? At what point did he pull the plug on that? Did he keep it on the line for a while, or was it like in March he said, we're not doing it this year? What did that look like?
It was one of the big problems was just so many people justifiably canceled. I mean, okay. There's just so many different levels of risk out there. Some people could care less, and other people are incredibly paranoid. So if half the people cancel the trip, suddenly it's not economically viable, because you still have to have all of the ship crew. You have to pay for all of this. So, you're going to be paying the same price whether you have 10 people or 110 people. And just was not making any sense to do it this year. The company that we work with, Quark Expeditions, said at the time they were planning on holding the trip. But Doug and ISACs decided not to. Probably a good thing considering what's happening.
We had a trip planned last spring in early May to sail around the north of Norway, which we did the previous year as well. And I was thinking there couldn't be a worse place to be than on a 10 bunk sailboat for a week with people from around the world during COVID. It's laughable really to think about it right now, but at least a cruise ship has a little bit more space, but a
lot more people as well. So it's relative.
Yeah. Megan, what's on your horizon? I mean, are you thinking about the future, or are you just day to day? I mean, one parent to another, I kind of know how this
I'm a parent. Mike's a parent.
I know you're all parents, but I don't know.
I think everyone's just surviving. But yeah, I'm excited for winter and to get out skiing. And I think the ski industry is going to be fine through this. Like, it's an outdoor sport, and we all know that being outside in fresh air, you're at less risk. So there's lots to be excited about. I was going to bring up, but the increase of like the Bluebird backcountry model out of Colorado. I don't know if you guys are following that, but it's like a, resort or a backcountry ski area, not a resort, but encouraging that sort of avalanche control, some trail maps, some guiding, gear rental and instruction, and getting people out into the backcountry in those kind of ways that, maybe we'll see more of that in different parts of the country. That could be a good model out in Colorado for what other places could do. I know they're on private land and there was a lot of logistical hurdles, but could be cool to see places like that to get more people out into sort of more safe, confined areas.
That's a really cool model. And Eric Lambert, who's one of the founders of that, he's a fascinating guy and a great mind. So I do hope that he's creating a blueprint there. And it really kind of begs the question of like, look, this is where I think about Stowe, right? For many years, the trails were cut. There were no lifts. Everybody that went there got off the train in Waterbury, drove up and went skiing. They had skins. And it's a little bit of a back to basics, very much a back to basics concept. Hattrup, what do you think? Is that going to be the future? Are we going to see more and more of that, or?
Oh, I think backcountry will continue to grow. I don't think people are going to leave the lifts to backcountry ski. It's just too easy. There's a whole bunch of people that are more interested in making 20 runs in a day as opposed to one. But there are a number of alpine downhill skiers that are getting interested in the backcountry, and you're seeing that in all the types of equipment that's being sold out there, and the bindings that allow you to ski at the resort with all the safety features, but then go touring. So I think you're going to see a lot more products like that. People, especially this year, if you want to guarantee that you're going to get to ski this year, then you better have a touring setup. And if you only have one setup, then it's something like that you can ski at the resort with, that has all the safety features. Yeah, maybe it's a little heavier when you go touring, but you can go touring. Yeah, I don't think we're going to see any slowing down of backcountry skiing at all.
Speaking of gear, for the first time ever, I'm starting to see some appropriately flexing smaller size boots available. I'm sure you guys, I don't know what the smallest size you have at Fisher is, but like we're seeing some 22.5, 80 flex Lang XTs for kids. And there's always been that wall on size and flex for children and for even, smaller people. Are we going to see more of that? Are we going to fully kind of break that glass ceiling? Is that the next place for backcountry to grow?
I have a hard time seeing that touring for kids is going to grow at any appreciable rate for a couple of reasons. One, most kids don't want to suffer going uphill. I know I didn't. I think I was 30 before I thought about walking. It's like, I got a lift right here. Why would I fucking walk uphill? So that's A, but B, kids are growing so fast, and to have an alpine setup for them and a backcountry setup for them that they're going to use a few days a year, I think we're not going to see development in that area as quickly.
Megan, have you done any gear type research on that, or?
I haven't. Mine are too little. They're still just learning how to ski the resort. So.
So I put my kids when they were young. I just cut up some old skins, slapped them onto their alpine skis, unbuckled their boots, and they just shuffled along with me. As long as they don't know any better, it's okay.
Yeah, we did there's some little contour, makes some little day alpine trekker for kids, and we did that, which is good because they can use their full-on alpine gear, and you're not going very far. I mean, you're lucky to get 300 vertical feet out of some kids with a lot of candy and motivation and bribery and whipping and cajoling. But yeah, it seems like touring appeals more to adults than to kids. I mean, you have to kind of enjoy pain a little bit.
Yeah. There are all sorts of rigs you can set up. I know when my oldest was 8 years old, we skied Tuckermans, and I set her up on a Nordic setup for the skin up from Pinkham Notch, and taped pieces of old skin to her Nordic skis, and I carried her alpine stuff, and that worked pretty well. But then I was carrying the snacks and the candy and all the skis.
That's another reason it won't grow, because you got to carry all the gear. The parents doesn't want to carry that much extra.
That's right. Well, look, I'm gonna open it up to some of these questions here. I'll start with the first one. How concerned should we be about emergency responders' ability to help injured backcountry skiers? And I know this was a big reason here at Smugglers. They stayed open to uphill traffic long after they closed the lifts, and we had a tib fib, and there was no patrol, and it was icy and gnarly, and they had a hard time getting rescue up there, and it was a big problem. But it seems like the rescue community and I used to be a patroller for many years, they seem to be now more comfortable with the procedures and what they have to do. What are you guys seeing out there, and from your friends in that world, search and rescue and patrol? What do you see? Andrew, we'll start with you.
My personal philosophy is to rely on my friends because they know where to go, and I kind of trust them. So if I was to be injured, I would call a friend, and there's just a lot of people touring in the backcountry in the Wasatch. So I think there's a good chance that people would help. They would make a sled. They would get you out rather than just defaulting to backcountry rescue. I mean, if you're talking about an avalanche, you could be waiting an hour before an official party got out there and was able to help you. You'd be way better off just working with your friends who are already out there. And we also have, we're close to a big city, so there's a lot of helicopter access as far as I forget what they're called, but the helicopters that can fly in. So within the resorts, I know they were concerned about it. If they close the resort and somebody gets hurt in the resort, even though it's closed, it's more of an issue because they want to make sure that they're not dragging unnecessary people into it. But as far as the backcountry goes, being self-reliant, both for yourself and helping out the community, I think is still very relevant.
To jump in here on resorts, I think that's a big concern for the resorts is what happens if you get an outbreak in the patrol. Most of the patrol shacks are small. I know in Sun Valley, they're building yurts so that they've got more space, because if the patrol, if you get a handful of people in the patrol that get it, you're going to have to shut down the resort, because it's not like you can just pull in more patrollers that know the systems and know their way around the resort. And so that's a big concern for the resorts.
And Mike, you just had a bit of a rescue situation. Mike, for those of you who don't know, and why would you, Mike had a bike accident in the late summer and had to be rescued, right? What was your rescue situation as far as the COVID protocol?
Well,
do you remember it?
Yeah, no, I remember it, but COVID protocol. So I was able to ride most of the way out before I met the rescuers on their way in, and typical protocol you see anywhere else. They're wearing masks. They've got hand sanitizers and they're careful that way. But and then of course, when I got into the hospital situation, it's a whole nother level. I mean, they're super conscientious. The people that have COVID are in a whole different wing of the hospital than the rest of the patients. And you can't get close to the hospitals. When I was in there, my family couldn't come to see me. I couldn't even go down and meet them at the door. So in terms of emergency medical practitioners, COVID, I think from what I can tell, it's the same as in the regular hospitals. It's not hugely different.
Well, so much of the concern in the spring was overwhelming the healthcare system and doing something which might have been considered frivolous. Let's hope we don't get to a place where that again becomes a concern.
No, but and that's a great point. And I actually stopped touring last spring for a while. I spent the first month of COVID just Nordic skiing, and I'm not really a Nordic skier. So, but I think we all need to be. And here's a guy who maybe didn't do a very good job of that, or definitely didn't do a very good job of that. But we all need to back off a little bit from where we know that edge is. Early on in Sun Valley was one of the highest hit places. I think it might have been the highest infection rate on the planet at one point, but certainly way up there. And there's I think there's maybe one ventilator in town and very few hospital beds, but we were fortunate because it wasn't strong anywhere else. And we shuttled everybody down to Twin Falls or to Boise. But now all those towns their hospitals are filling up. So a town like Ketchum, small town with a small hospital, is not going to have that capacity anymore, not have that outlet. So so everybody does need to back off a little bit, save those big objectives for another year. They're still going to be there. Do something a little bit mellower. Ski a slope that's 30 degrees. It's still really fun skiing. That you're not worried about an avalanche. So I think all those kinds of precautions are especially prudent this year.
Megan, can you dovetail onto that from your perspective in your zone?
Yeah, obviously that messaging hit pretty hard in the spring with avalanche centers closing down their forecasting and telling people, don't come backcountry skiing here because they didn't want to put a strain on their both medical resources and their emergency responders. And I think Mike is right. We definitely want to, keep toning it back this winter and relying on ourselves and our partners for those types of rescue situations, ideally avoiding them in the first place. But if, accidents were to happen, I think you have to kind of be self-reliant and not assume that there's going to be someone coming for you. I also think in the spring, though, we didn't know as much about the virus and how to protect ourselves and others from it. So I think hopefully first responders, can come out and help people and feel comfortable with face coverings and other precautions put in place, since we have more information on that than we did in March.
We have several questions here from folks asking about Vermont's quarantine policy. And just because we have a largely Vermont audience, I'll share what I know of it, which is you have to quarantine for 2 weeks once you arrive here, or you have to take a test, quarantine for 7 days, and then take another test. So that's pretty controversial, I think, for a lot of people in the ski industry. And it sounds like to me that is a lot more stringent than anything I'm hearing from certainly Utah, California.
Utah, 0.
Right. California, what's the policy there as far as flying in? And
no policy, you can come on in.
Yeah, and Idaho, I'm sure, is wide open too.
Yeah, Idaho's wide open.
Yeah,
there's no restrictions at this point. We'll see if that changes, but right now there's not.
How do each of you feel about the safety of your families and your communities, given the lack of that sort of policy? And Andrew, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
At some point, it's all very, removed. But then yesterday, one of my daughter's close friends, was put in quarantine by the school. And so suddenly it becomes very real. We are a little lucky in Utah in that we're naturally socially distanced. I mean, there's areas, some of the counties, Daggett County, Iron County, San Juan, there's just, cows. There's nothing out there. But We generally avoid the events in Park City and bars and stuff like that. So we feel pretty comfortable about it. What we're doing, and we modify our plans. We were going to go down and have a big weekend with a bunch of other people, and that got canceled because of just COVID concerns. So we are modifying and keeping an eye out for what's going on.
Megan, how about there in Tahoe?
Well, this summer we had sort of an explosion of people relocating here with their tech jobs from the Bay Area, and huge real estate boom and tons of crowding. The grocery stores getting wiped out, and it was kind of interesting. We could see that again this winter. It's kind of slowed down now because we're in shoulder season, but I do think a lot of these resort towns, and Vermont's included, once people can get into the state, following those quarantine protocols, hopefully, that we'll see these little mountain towns swell with people who can now work from anywhere as long as there's Wi-Fi. So there is a risk of, overburdening the small hospitals that we have, people bringing the virus in from elsewhere. So yeah, there's definitely a concern in these small communities. And I think as long as you do your part, and you hope that others do the same, we can continue with our lives.
How about you? Are you concerned about, I know that Sun Valley's off the beaten track and it's not terribly overcrowded, but how do you feel about a ton of people coming in there?
Well, no, you're right. It is off the beaten track, but like I just stated, it was one of the highest infection rates on the planet, and all the ski resorts they're a cesspool with people coming from all over the place, mingling in bars and lodges. And so, yeah, there's and it's been summer's easy because people are outside, and everybody that comes to Sun Valley is there to be outside, to go mountain biking or fishing or hiking, and it's easy to separate then. But with winter coming, it's going to be more of a challenge for sure. And I feel pretty comfortable. I mean, kids are probably the most likely to get it because I think they're less concerned about it. They don't think about it much. None of their friends have been hospitalized, so that it's not front of mind for them. And I think most of the adults have just feel comfortable with not socializing as much. And if they do, they're doing it with small groups. And, again, up until now, it's been outside barbecues. So we'll see what happens in the winter.
I think from a ski resort's perspective, they really don't want to be known as a hot spot. Like we had Park City was open for business last spring, and all of a sudden they had a whole bunch of infections, and it's just really bad for business. And so I think, the resorts, at least in Utah, are open, but I think if anything starts to happen, they're going to shut it down right away, because Alta doesn't want to be known as a hot spot because people tend to hang on to that.
Well, I think it would be very easy to get into politics now because as, resorts may or may not have to shut down here in Vermont and elsewhere, the economic reality of that without any sort of backstop from Congress is getting, more and more concerning by the day. But, I guess I just went there. Forgive me. We have a question here about, and I'll just share with you all who haven't skied a lot in Vermont. There has been a big movement over the last 20 years, and officially maybe over the last 7 or 8 to open up more backcountry terrain, because for years there's been not legitimate backcountry terrain, trimming lines here and there, and much was resort access, but now increasingly with the change in gear and the explosion in the just interest, it's become more prolific elsewhere. And there are zones on federal land and state land that are condoned, and no sooner are they opened up within the last several years that they're just, when the skiing is good, they're like hammered. Parking's an issue, and so on and so forth. And the question we have, one of the questions we have here is how much could there be and should there be to kind of satiate that interest? And my answer to that would be, and I'd welcome any perspective at all if you have any. I know it's a little outside of your ballpark, but my answer would be that it's almost endless. I mean, I think the demand, I look at mountain biking in Vermont, and there's so many really great riding zones now, and they're all really busy. And it used to be like there'd be a new zone that opened up and it would get hammered, and then the next new zone would open up, and that would kind of be a little less popular at the previous one. But it just seems like it's endless, and it seems the same in touring in general. I mean, the curve for touring, as we've all seen throughout our careers, it doesn't seem like there's really an end in sight, climate change notwithstanding. Hattrup, you're on that side of the business. What are you guys seeing at Fisher? Like, when are we hitting peak backcountry here?
It's hard to say, but I think we're a ways from hitting the peak. Like you mentioned, it's been growing over the last 20 years, and especially the last handful of years. And I don't see any slowdown to it, because the equipment is getting better. It's getting easier to get out there. It's getting easier to do it on one set of gear. You could never do that before. So as you mentioned early on, that's the roots of our sport, was people just walking out into the mountains with skis. And that's one thing that outside of the equipment that you're using, if you go out for a tour, it's just like the people that were out 100 years ago doing it. So that's one thing that I think is really special, is that hasn't changed. That experience is the same as it used to be, albeit with different equipment. So I don't think it's going to slow down anytime soon. Eventually it's going to peak, but I think we're still a ways away from that.
I would have thought peak backcountry would have been about 10 years ago. I've just been amazed at how popular it's been and continues to be. But, part of it is the equipment has gotten so much better. And, in the olden days, you had to learn, if you wanted to backcountry, you had to tele. And now there's really good offerings in the alpine touring equipment. So if you know how to resort ski, you can just instantly transfer to that. And then there's also the price of lift tickets. If you look at, if you walk up and buy a day pass at Deer Valley, it's a couple $100, and suddenly it's like, wow, a full touring kit is only, $1,000. So suddenly it doesn't seem like it's that much more. And the quality of the experience that you get is just, you could ski an unbroken field of powder. Which is pretty hard to do at a lot of the resorts. So it seems like people are discovering it and getting more and more into it. I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Megan, do you have any thoughts on that? When are we going to hit peak backcountry?
I mean, I think
peak oil.
Almost like it's a problem that there's too many people, but I think we should just need to recognize how cool it is that all these people are taking the time and energy to climb up on their own 2 feet. So I think that's really a cool thing that we're seeing in the ski industry. And we're getting, like Andrew said, more people are able to get into it because it's more affordable than skiing a resort. So as long as we can support those organizations that are providing access, and like Rasta in Vermont that's cutting glades to give, and all the local backcountry alliances that are working on like parking issues and working with federal land managers. So as long as we can support those organizations that are providing places for us to get out, protecting public lands. So as long as we could have the space to go do it, I think it's great that there's still more people getting into it.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing up Rasta. And I'd also like to give a shout out to our friends at the Catamount Trail Association, who have done a ton of work for many, many years to keep access open for more traditional XCD touring, and also a lot of these new gladed zones. And they're super active and have had a huge impact on the sport here.
That's one thing I think, especially in Vermont, you guys have a lot of terrain that's maybe wouldn't be considered true backcountry touring in terms of the alpine gear that we've been talking about, but and that's something that I'm going to do this winter. In Sun Valley, we've got the big mountains, and then you've got in the valleys, you've got unbelievable Nordic skiing, but then there's these foothills in between that are too short to go for a real tour where you're transitioning, pulling skins, putting skins on, where a burly tour cross-country boot with a wide metal edge ski and either fish scale so that you can go up if it's 10 minutes up and a few minutes down, and then another 15 up and then down. There's a lot of terrain like that. Whereas with touring gear, if you were pulling skins every 10 minutes, you'd go nuts. But this, I think, is really cool. And I know there's a lot of terrain like that in Vermont. And the cool thing about this terrain too is, again, you don't need to have a beacon shovel probe, as long as because the angles are usually not big. I'm talking about, big, whether it's golf courses or just you have a lot of hilly terrain, or even dirt roads that are snow covered in the winter. All that, you don't need beacon shovel probe, all the education that goes along with that and the experience, but you can still get out and enjoy touring and all the things that we like about touring on bigger mountains.
Yeah, for sure. We call that light, or I call that light touring, that fish scale ski, maybe a 3-pin binding, all of that stuff is incredible. And it's gotten so good, in fact, that, you don't even really have to telly, even though you want to. You don't even have to do that. There's so much flotation. But yeah, I think a lot of people in Vermont will be doing a lot of that skiing without question, provided we have the snow. I just have to mention one thing. You mentioned about how we're doing the same thing when we go touring as someone 100 years ago. I'm reading the biography of Hans Moser and Hans Moser was one of the early guides in Canada around the Banff area and beyond, written by Chick Scott. It's called Deep Powder and Steep Rock, and it's just incredible. I don't know if anyone has the opportunity to read that. It really kind of takes you back to that place, which is where we all want to get, and that's just sliding on snow in beautiful terrain with wonderful people and some goulash at the end of the trail.
This episode was brought to you by the Vermont Department of Tourism, reminding you to check and observe the latest travel restrictions at vermontvacation.com. Next up on the Backcountry podcast, I talk with filmmaker Bjarne Salen.
I think it adds so much to the story as well, to show a tiny bit of who's holding the camera. Like if I watch a film and there are 2 people climbing a mountain, yeah, that's rad, but someone is shooting it, so you're missing part of it. I want to know that as an audience, and I think that's kind of what Cody and I have developed a little bit more and more.
Bjarne Salen has followed some of the best athletes in the world on some of the rowdiest lines. The only difference is he carries the camera, and now more than ever, he's in front of it. The Backcountry podcast is produced by Backcountry Magazine, an imprint of Height of Land Publications in Jeffersonville, Vermont. Lucy Higgins is our editor-in-chief. Our intro music was composed by Alex Paul. Bob Rusnock of Bluestream Voice and Imaging engineered this episode. Additional thanks to Tyler Cohen, Betsy Monero, Mike Lorenz, Robin Earl, Paul Davis, Justin Ryer, Michelle Peoples, Holly Howard, Karen Heward, and John Costello. At Backcountry Magazine, our small staff works hard to bring you stories that are thoughtfully edited, beautifully produced, and thoroughly fact-checked. Please consider supporting our independent journalism with a subscription to the magazine. You can subscribe or check out other swag at our website, backcountrymagazine.com. Use promo code PODCAST for 10% off your entire order. I'm Adam Howard. Until next time, I'll see you in the hills. Thanks for listening.